Good evening, everybody. This is Melissa Davis. I'm the director of Rethink Ed, and I thank you for joining us. My apologies for our delay. We're a couple minutes behind. We're working through some technology issues, but at this time, I'm going to hand things over to Amber Garvey, and we'll get started.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Rethink Education Family Support webinar. We're going to have 10 sessions this year to help families better support their children's needs while learning from home. Tonight's topic is finding the technology support you need. I'm excited to share with you some ways in which you can find help, ideas, and support for your child's use of technology. So let's go ahead and get started this evening. As Melissa introduced me, my name is Amber Garvey, and I'm lucky enough to serve as Rethink Education's content development lead. I'm a former classroom teacher and a district level instructional technology specialist, and have a very special guest in the chat with me, Rachel Wright-Junio, and she serves as our project manager for Rethink Education, and she brings such a wealth of knowledge and experience to our team, and I'm super happy that we're working together tonight to bring you this webinar. Rachel is going to be monitoring the chat this evening to provide any support you may have. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat throughout the session, and she'll be there to help you. So here's our agenda for the evening. First, we're going to take time to go over a few webinar basics and some meeting etiquette. Then we're going to discuss how to find support for your children and their devices that they are using for learning from home. Then we're going to talk about how to locate tutorials and tools that your children are using for school. And then we're going to discuss a few tips, tricks, and lifesavers. Yes, tonight you are going to have some lifesavers coming your way. And then we're going to close up our session and provide some time for questions on the topics if there's anything that you have questions about at the end. So let's go ahead and go over our meeting norms. And these are some expectations that we have in order to make this a successful session. So first of all, be present. Just being here, you've already met a norm. That's awesome. And we're going to have you engage a little bit tonight in our session. So please partake and participate. Then we're going to make sure that we're being respectful to others. This seems like one of those things we shouldn't have to say, but we all come from different places in our lives and different perspectives. And so we just want to make sure to honor that. Also, if you have any questions, like I mentioned before, place those in the chat box, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Also, you're going to be muted through the session, but that's not because we don't want your participation. That's what the chat box is for. We just want to make sure that there aren't any noises or things that are distracting for other participants. So please feel free to chat and collaborate using our chat box. And then, as best we can without technology issues, we're going to start and end on time because we really honor your time and appreciate you being here this evening. So we are, for any of you who've attended one of our two previous webinars, we were using the WebEx platform, and this time we're using the Zoom platform for our sessions, and we will be using Zoom moving forward. So I want to make sure that you can locate the chat bar. So take a few moments and look for the chat icon that's in the chat bar, and this is how you're going to participate with any questions that you might have during the session. And this is also where you can enter comments. We have loved seeing conversations going on in the chat bar between participants so that you're sharing ideas and thoughts. So feel free to use that chat bar. You'll also notice that it says to everyone. And so it should be there by default. So when you put something in the chat and you hit send, it's going to go to all of us. But if you did want to message a particular person, you can click on the to everyone button and switch it to Rachel or myself, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. So at times you may be asked to respond with a reaction this evening. So I also want you to be sure that you can see the reactions button on your screen. So locate that for me. And this is where you can use some different symbols. And we are going to use those purposefully in the session, but I certainly don't mind if you like something and you get excited about something. Let us know by adding it to the chat bar or adding a reaction. So hopefully you've all gotten to know Zoom a little bit, and we can go ahead with our session. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to start with is device support. Students bring home a variety of devices, and knowing how to support them is super important for students working from home. So let's take a look at some resources to help you better support these technology devices. So first of all, it's important to know what kind or kinds of devices your child uses while at home. So there's usually a primary device, one that's most often used to support student work. So knowing the type of device that you have can help you find support faster when you need it. Here are some examples of devices that your child may be using. And as I'm reading the list, I'm going to pause between each, and I'd like to know if your child is using that particular device. So if you can let me know in the chat, when I read one that your child uses, use that reaction button and give me a thumbs up to indicate that's the one that your child uses most often. And that will kind of help us see what we are all using with students at home. So our first device is a desktop, and that can be a PC desktop or a Mac desktop. So if you are using that at home, if your child is using that at home, give me a thumbs up if that's their primary device. Okay, let's move to our next device. Laptop, that can be a PC laptop or a Mac laptop. See some thumbs up there? Awesome. Okay, let's go on to our next one. Tablet. Now, usually, this is the one that's confusing for some people. A tablet, generally speaking, has a touch screen and sometimes is foldable, so that it's foldable, that the keyboard can be up or down. It's kind of like a really flexible laptop. Anybody use tablets? Okay, I see not as many, couple tablets out there. What about an iPad? Okay, we have some iPad users. Oh, yes, good. What about a Chromebook? I see lots of Chromebooks. Yes, this is a very typical device that's used in K-12 education because it's so cost effective. Okay, the next one, how many of you, your child uses your smartphone or their own smartphone to complete their work? Not as many. It is really hard to use that smaller screen, but you can definitely see that there are those of us and our children who do use those smartphones when at home. So now that you've had identified the type or types of devices that your child's using for schoolwork, let's focus on the types of support that may be available for you to use. So let's take a look at the first type of support, and that is in-person support. Getting in-person support is so important, especially if you're having technical difficulties. And this is really a challenging one for many districts and for many students and their parents. But at your child's school, there is usually a media specialist or a technology facilitator who can help you. So the best thing you can do is find out who that tech support contact is at your child's school and what procedures are in place for requesting help. Oftentimes the school have a technology request system or a ticket system so that the media specialist or the technology facilitator can enter a ticket for your child's device so that a technician can take a look at it, and that they're doing that on your behalf. So just make sure that you know what the procedure is for your child's school. And that way, moving forward, when there is an issue with your child's device, you'll know who it is you need to contact and what that procedure is. Now, some schools and districts offer a technology support helpline or a request hub. And this number may appear on your school or district website. So if your school system offers this support, having this number or email handy will be very helpful when issues arise. So make yourself familiar with the resources that are available on your school or your district or charter website so that you'll know what you need to do and what those procedures are. Now, whether you contact help in person or if you contact a remote system like an email system or leave a message, it's important to share basic information so that they can better support your technical needs. So I'm going to provide you with the list of some of the information that can be shared in order to get you better and faster technical support. So this may seem like a no-brainer, and that's actually why I started with it on the previous slide, is knowing what device you have. Before you call, before you chat, before you email, whatever the system's in place, it's really important that you know what device is there. Now, it's also important to know what device each specific child uses, because in some districts, kindergarten devices may be very different than those at the middle school or high school level. So you need to be able to identify the device your child is using so that help can be targeted and directed to the right device specialist. So for example, the technician for a Mac may be completely different than the technician for a Chromebook. So being able to say what type of device it is will go ahead and branch you off to the support that you need. The next thing to consider is the name and the ID of students. So each student in a school has a unique ID that helps identify them. And that's really in case there's someone that has the same first and last name or similar names to other students. And providing this information will providing this information will help specialists to identify your child's account. So if you're not sure about your child's unique ID or student number, be sure and ask your child's teacher. He or she will have that information, and this is used for a lot of different systems, including PowerSchool, if you are familiar with using PowerSchool. The next piece of information to share is the grade level and the school. Oftentimes students at different grade levels, as I mentioned before, have different devices, but they also may have different privileges. For example, a high school student may be able to watch YouTube, but maybe a kindergarten and first grade student may not have access to YouTube. And so if you're having an issue with something, knowing what privileges are available to that grade level is going to be helpful. Additionally, if the support is at the district level instead of the school level, providing the name of your child's school can also help locate information on your child faster. Now, this next one is important because if you are having an issue with a particular application or particular system, it's important to note that. So for example, if your child can't log into his or her Google account, then you would need to indicate the issue is with logging into Google. So it's not necessarily that Google's broken, but they're having difficulty logging into Google. So the next thing is the description of what is happening. This can often be difficult, especially for those of us who maybe don't have as much technical experience and you're not sure how much or how little to say. So think about the important parts of the issue that need to be noted. So maybe they don't need to know that this happens every morning when you and your family are sitting around the table eating breakfast, but saying every morning this happens is an important detail. So it's all about balancing too much information with not enough. However, if you're really not sure, erring on the side of too much is okay. But regardless of the way in which you get support, always be sure to check the procedures and policies and expectations from your child's school first. They're going to know how to best assist and advise you. So now that we know how to get support for our technology hardware, let's take a look at some tools your students may be using and how to get help with those. Just as a quick survey of the group, we're going to use our reaction buttons again. So get ready, locate those reaction buttons. Does your school or district use Google or Microsoft as your platform? So you're going to use a thumbs up if your school or district uses Google. And you're going to use the heart reaction if your school or district uses Microsoft. Thank you so much for participating. I see lots of thumbs up, so lots of Google users and a few Microsoft users. Well, you're all going to be in luck because I'm going to share some of both. And these are resources that you're going to be able to take and use moving forward. So we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at some Google resources, and then I'm going to point you into some Microsoft Office and Microsoft platform resources. So if your child uses Chromebooks or Google Apps for completing work, here's going to be some resources that are helpful for you. So at this first link, you're going to find the Tech Toolkit for Families. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click on some of these resources and just point out a couple things that are really interesting about them. So this Tech Toolkit for Parents, this is actually a YouTube playlist that Google created in response to COVID-19 so that parents and guardians could find resources faster. So if you needed to know how to use Google Meet, for example, or how to better secure your device, or using Family Link on Chromebooks, this is a great playlist that you can access and watch short videos on exactly what you're looking for. And that's that Tech Toolkit. So at this next link, there is a glossary. Now, some of you may kind of think, well, I don't need a glossary, but I'm sure you've heard some Google words where you're like, are we reading Dr. Seuss? What's happening? So there's a great Google Terms glossary for parents and families. So if you hear your child talk about Google Forms or Google Keep or Google Sites, this not only gives you the terminology, but it also gives you a great definition, and there's some hyperlinks in there to give you examples of those resources. So if you know Google, but then you hear a Google term you're really not sure about, this glossary can be super helpful for you. So this next link has best practices for family engagement, and this resource has some great ideas for how to use technology both inside and outside the classroom. So I'm just going to click on that so you can see. It even gives you tips for how you can communicate with your teachers around technology, or some ideas for learning beyond school. And again, these are just some great resources, and again, it has links for you to click on and explore a little further. The next item on our Google Apps support list is a technology FAQ page. And I think this one is super, super helpful to parents. It's a great place to access resources from what to do when your child's locked out of their Chromebook to how to use Google tools without wireless access. So if you click on the technology FAQs, it's similar to the format of the other documents where you're going to see the frequently asked question on the left and the answer on the right. And again, with hyperlinks to additional resources. The next link is a link of parent and student tutorials. And I do want to give you a little bit of history around this document. As we all know, when the quarantine started happening with COVID-19, families, parents, teachers, everybody were scrambling with ways to better communicate with one another. And this particular spreadsheet, this parent and student tutorial spreadsheet, came out of a need that parents had for trying to find resources for specific Google tools. And this resource was created and collated by a lot of Google trainers, a lot of people that are just passionate about Google. And these have the apps across the top. And beneath each of the apps, you're going to find resources that are quick video tutorials or quick written tutorials for how to use those resources. And this is an excellent spreadsheet of resources that have been curated for you. So I highly recommend you checking that out. The final Google Apps resource is actually one that I created in my previous role at the district level. It's a video for parents about how to use Google Classroom. So if your school uses Google Classroom at all, I really recommend you watching that, because it can sometimes be confusing for parents to understand, how is my child supposed to submit an assignment? Where do I find the due dates? How do they access their work? How do they attach an image to their assignment? And that video is exactly that. So if that's something that your school district uses, I'd recommend you watch that. It's specifically made just for parents and guardians. So now that we've spent some time talking about Google, let's shift for those of you who are Microsoft Office users with your children, and let's talk about those Microsoft products. So here are a couple of Microsoft resources. The first link is a guide that was created by Microsoft for helping families know how to use those Microsoft Office tools with their children. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click on this in case you haven't seen this before. There are tutorials, there are screenshots, and resources to answer many of your questions. So how do you sign into your account? And what if your house has low bandwidth? And how do they communicate with their teacher? All of these resources can be found on this distance learning page for parents. And again, that's for Microsoft Office. This next guide is a quick start guide. I love quick start one-pager guides that make things super easy. And this one-pager is basically for parents on how do you get started with Teams. Teams is something that not a lot of people use for communication. And so when you get put into it and you're not sure how to use it, this one-pager can be helpful. There are even some tutorials about how to use the Teams platform while learning it for at home. And also there are some troubleshooting tips for bandwidth issues when using Teams. So this third link is Microsoft Tips for Students and Families, and it again is made by Microsoft Education. And I'm going to click on it because here's what I love. They have actually gotten children in their videos. So this is also spoken by children, and it's a great way to find out little tips for students on how to insert pictures into Microsoft Word, how to use Teams as a student, lots of different little tutorials. And as you can notice, they're really short and they're primarily made with students in mind, but we find lots of parents find these helpful as well. Now, for those of you who are in low bandwidth areas, the last link is especially helpful because it provides tips to minimize the bandwidth pool when using not only Teams, but also files offline. And I think this one's super important to share with anyone that you know that may be using the Microsoft platform, but unfortunately don't have the bandwidth to really interact as highly and as effectively as they would want to. There are some ways that they can still participate. So that last link is very helpful for those situations. So hopefully these resources will help you to support your child if you use the Microsoft platform. So now we're going to switch gears just a little bit. We've looked at devices, we've looked at platform support. So now is my favorite part. I'm going to show you a few tips and tricks for working with your children at home with technology. So often it's difficult for parents to know which tools and resources are appropriate for which grade level of child. So one of the first things that I would like to share is simple. Common Sense Media. And if you've never been there, it's a super helpful website that provides information for parents on technology tools and apps and how age appropriate they are for your children. So I'm going to click here. And once you're on the site, I do want to direct you to the top where it says Parents Need to Know, which gets your attention. And you'll notice there's a section on by age. And so if you were looking for something for tweens or teens or little kids or preschoolers, it will give you a narrowed down list so that you can focus on the things that are appropriate for your child. So that's Common Sense Media. It talks about technology tools. It talks about applications. And if you're interested, it also covers things like books and movies as well. It's a very incredibly helpful site for parents to help guide them and inform them on choosing information and materials for their children. So it's also important to just be able, when you're asking for help and you're wanting to understand technology at your school, that you have some questions in mind, some guiding questions to help you get the information that you need. So I just want to give you a few things to think about in terms of having those conversations with your school. And so one of these questions is, what is your learning management system? Now, if you're not familiar with the term learning management system, you may have heard the initials LMS, but you probably know it as more familiar as Canvas or Google Classroom or Blackboard. Those are the type of learning management systems that your school may be using, and knowing which one is being used will help you find the support you need for your child. Also, just asking what the rules and the policies are for a school-owned device. So if your child is taking a device back and forth, it's really important for you to know what are those rules, what are those policies. Some parents want to know if their child can bring their own device to school. And most schools that have a policy for bringing devices have what's called a BYOD, bring your own device, or BYOT, bring your own technology system. So you may want to check with your school and see if they allow you to bring your own device or if they provide a device for your student to use. The last thing to kind of keep in mind for questions, for guiding question, is what's in place to keep your child safe while they're online, not just at school, but also if they're bringing devices home. Many districts pay for additional security features, like something called Securely is one that I can think of, where it actually still allows the parent to have some control over what their child can see and do while using a device from school. So those are some questions that you can keep in mind so that when you talk to your child's teacher or your child's school, that you can get the information you need so that you can provide better support for your child when they're learning from home. So now let's kind of move to some fun tutorials. So some of you may use certain keystrokes to save you time. A lot of people use copy and paste, Control C, Control V. I want to share with you two of my favorites for Chrome that are wonderful when you are working with children from home. And the reason I'm showing you Chrome is because that's the browser that I'm using to do this webinar from. And so that's the one that's going to make the most sense for me to show you. But this first one, I literally use this multiple times a day, and it saves my day every time. And that is Control Shift T. Now, if you are on a PC or Chromebook, it's Control Shift T. If you're on a Mac, it's going to be Command Shift T. But I want to show you what that does. So let me demonstrate by saying, remember how we had all of those resources that I just showed you, and I opened them up in a tab, and then I closed the tab. Well, watch what happens when I do Control Shift T. Remember, we were on Common Sense Media. We were looking at that document about when bandwidth is low, and I can keep using this and opening up the resources that I've closed. Now, why this is so cool is if you accidentally click on a resource and then close it and you didn't mean to, that is a wonderful way to get your tab back. But I'm just going to switch your lens for a minute. I'm sure that your children are the best behaved children on the planet, have never done this, but let's just pretend that they may have. So have you ever walked close to your child and all of a sudden they start closing tabs? I'm sure they were looking at something really informative and educational, but they just didn't want you to know how smart they were. But one of the ways that we can use this as parents is if you are having a little curmudgeon of a day with your child and they're closing tabs and you want to see where they were, you can simply walk up to their device, Control Shift T, and it will open up the last tab they closed. So that is super helpful. Now, this doesn't work after the computer has been logged off or shut down, but it is helpful to have it in your back pocket for the, I didn't mean to close that tab. Oh no, now I'm going to have to hunt for it again. But it's also great to have if you do have that child who tends to close tabs when you come too close. So just some tips to keep in the back pocket. So that was the first keystroke. Now, my next keystroke that I want to show you is also a Chrome keystroke, and that's how to make things larger or smaller on your screen. So I'm going to go to another tab and show this to you. So I have this article here, and the text is not super small, but I'm sure you've been on websites where the text is very tiny. So one of the things that you can do is use that control or command if you're on a Mac and the plus sign. And I want you to notice what happens to my text is it starts getting larger. So this is going to be helpful for you if you have a child who maybe has some issues with vision and needs to be able to see it bigger, or they're trying to use their Chromebook and maybe it's just a really tiny screen, or their tablet, and you want them to be able to see it better. So that control plus or command plus is going to make it larger. That just helps me with my old age. So I'm going to use command minus or control minus to go the opposite direction. So you can make things larger and you can make things smaller. And this is just a way to get you some help with you if you have visual issues. And again, these are just 2 keystrokes that I showed you, and these are super helpful to use with children. So teach them how to use the control plus and minus. If you want to show them how to use the control shift T so they can open up tabs that they may have inadvertently closed, or you can use it as your little trick to see where they were. Either way. So now that we've learned a couple of keystroke tricks to put in your back pocket, I want to share with you some other lifesavers that can really help you support your child at home. And we're probably not going to have a whole bunch of time for questions, but these are ones that I really want to show you. So I do want to go ahead and keep going with these. And these are extensions. And in case you don't know what an extension is, it's a little piece of software that can be downloaded onto your browser. Now, I'm going to again use Chrome because I'm in Chrome, but you can download browsers for Edge. You can download browsers for Mozilla Firefox. They're everywhere, but I do want to show you 2 specific ones that I like to use in Chrome. And what an extension is a tiny piece of software that goes at the top of your browser. You can see a screenshot here, but you can also see it on the top of my browser here that actually extend the use of your browser. It makes it do things it wouldn't normally do. To find extensions, I have a link for the Chrome Web Store here, and I'm just going to show you. So if I wanted to install the Google Keep extension, I'm going to find it on the Chrome Web Store, and then I'm going to add it to Chrome, and then it would just install it here at the top. So that's how you would go about installing it. So 2 extensions that I want to show you are Mercury Reader and Helper Bird. And I actually want to demonstrate these for you so that you can see how powerful these are. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up this link here. This is a site about honeybees. It's something that may be assigned to a child in the evening for their homework or during their online learning. Read this article. So what I've installed here is Mercury Reader. Now I want to give you a scenario. A lot of times your children are given websites to look at that have a lot of advertisements in the corner. And those can be super distracting. Those can be super distracting for adults, but when there are lots of things spinning, some even have video, it's really difficult to keep a child focused. So here's what Mercury Reader does. So I have this article open, but there are some distracting things on the side. If I click my Mercury Reader extension, I want you to see what happens. It now puts it into what looks like a document. It stripped out all the text and all the pertinent images from the article, and it actually has given me a document. I'm not really looking at all those things, but if there are links, it's still going to include the links. This is a great way to strip out the fluff. And so I show students how to use this so they can manage their own and see if they're at a site that's super distracting, they can just use this. So I'm going to click on this gear at the top and show you that I also have some more tools that I can use with this Mercury Reader. If I'm a child who needs larger text, smaller text, I can control the size of my text. I can even decide if I want a different kind of font. So do I want one that has swirls, or do I want one that's just more primary font? And then if I'm a person who needs a dark background with light text because I have some visual impairments, then I can do that as well. And that's just using the Mercury Reader platform. So all I had to do was open up that article and click on that little button, and that happened for me. So again, that's Mercury Reader. I love it. It's super easy to use. So the next one I want to show you, I'm actually going to go to a different article so that we can use a different one, just so that you can see this happen in two different places. This is an article about restoring rainforests, and it's already written in pretty kid-friendly language because it comes from Time for Kids. But I just want to show you another tool that could be used. Now, the other one that's mentioned, I'm going to come back here to show you. This one's called HelperBird. And when you see it in the web store, it says accessibility and dyslexia software. Now, immediately what happens is sometimes people will say, I don't need that because I don't have dyslexia, or I don't need accessibility. But I want to show you what this does, and you might change your mind, especially if your child needs extra help with reading. So I want you to look at this for a second. So I have this article. I'm going to click on HelperBird, and there's lots of pieces to HelperBird, but the only thing I'm going to look at is the one called Immersive Reader. So I'm going to open up the Immersive Reader. And what just happened is it stripped all the text from that website and put it into this page. Now I want to show you the kinds of tools that are in here that can extend that for you. So the first thing you notice on the bottom is there's a play button. I love that face. Thank you. I'm glad you're shocked and surprised, because this is awesome. So that play button that I see there is I can actually click play.
Restoring forests. Avia Joshi looks across the...
And now I can have it read aloud to me. So if I'm a student who maybe needs a little extra support reading this article, I can actually have it read aloud. And there's a little gear here, so I can even change the speed at which the voice reads, or I can change to listen to a male or female read it to me. So those are some things I can do with it. But even that is not all. And the way the browser, the way I have this set for showing you in Zoom, they're kind of hidden, but if I hover, you can see them. There's text preferences, grammar options, and there's reading preferences. I want to go through each of these with you really quickly. So for text preferences, now remember, I was just on a Time for Kids article and I clicked the button and this happened. Now look at all the other resources I have. So this again, I can change the text size depending on my own needs for vision. If I want to decrease or increase the spacing between the letters and words, I can do that. I can change my font. Again, like the other tool, I can also change to different colors of background depending on what I need for my own vision. So that's under text preferences, but let's look at some of the grammar options. Now, those of you out there who are grammar nerds might get super excited about this, because this is awesome. If I have a student who really needs syllable support, you can actually turn on syllables so it breaks apart the words. And this will show them they read land and then scape. So you can put in those syllables. Again, you didn't have to do it. This did it for you. Also, if you wanted to say, well, let's make all the verbs red, I could toggle on verbs. Now all my verbs are red, and maybe nouns, my nouns are purple. So now you're taking an article and extending it to look at parts of speech and learn about the language. Then I can even show labels so I can see, oh, here are my verbs and here are my nouns. So these are just a couple of the things that are in the Immersive Reader. This last one is the one I get most excited about, and this is why I wanted to be sure and come to this before we ended tonight. There are students for whom lots of text is overwhelming. And so there is a line focus tool where I can only go through one line at a time. So I'm able to monitor myself and make sure that I can only see a couple things at a time. The other thing that's great about this is there's a built-in picture dictionary. So if I am an English language learner or a student who maybe just needs a pictorial representation of the word, I can click on trees and I get a picture of a tree. planted. There's even a little picture of the verb, and there is a little way that I can click on it and have that read to me as well. But here's the piece that's really important for any of you out there who maybe have children for whom English is not their first language. So if the point of this article is for the child to understand the content of the article, not necessarily to read it in English, but to understand the content, you can actually have this entire article translated into your primary language. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my second language just to demonstrate. So here's German, and I'm going to have this entire article translated in German for me. Not only is it in German, but now if I go back and click the play button.
Wiederherstellung von Wäldern. Adia Yoshi blickt über eine.
So now I even can have that article read in my native language. And that's really important if you have a child who perhaps needs to have the content in a different language or in their second language so they can understand it. And all of this came by just installing that little add-on helper bird. So you can see how this can be super helpful even if you don't have dyslexia or need some accessibility tools. So both of those options are there, and I have linked them in the presentation so that you can get to them as well. And now that we're getting close to the end of our time, I do want to show you that with all of our resources for Rethink Ed, we have a calendar of our upcoming webinars. So you can see from our next one, we're going to be viewing or hearing about fostering independence while working from home. So if you're interested in that one, that's coming up December 13th. You can register at that first link. Also, we do have some awesome family support guides on our parent and guardian page. I do want to show you that we have some great articles in English and also in Spanish. And then down beneath it, we do have some content guides for math. Right now we have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math, but we will have content guides coming in other content areas. So by the end of the next school year, we'll have K through 8 content guides for all of the core content areas. So go back and look for those. Also, we want to share that we have now a YouTube playlist that will have our recordings of these webinars, so you can always go back and watch them. Right now, we have one of our webinars there, but we will be adding to them, and we would love for you to go and rewatch or share these with your other friends, your peers, whoever might be wanting to access those webinars. So Rachel is putting a link in the chat that it's this bit.ly link that will get you to this slideshow for tonight. So you'll have all the resources that we've shared. And I have almost taken up all our time this evening with all this exciting stuff. But I do want to thank you so much for coming to our webinar. We do have a really quick feedback form that Rachel's going to be posting in the chat that we would love to hear from you. We want to make sure these webinars are exactly what you as parents need to support your child while they're learning from home. So these surveys actually inform our topics. So please make sure that you take a little bit of time to fill that out. Also, after this webinar, I'll be sending out an email to you, not only with the link to this presentation again, but also with the link to that survey in case you don't have time to fill it out tonight, but would still like to give us some feedback. So I really appreciate you attending tonight's webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rachel, for being in the chat. Yes, we do super value your feedback. So I'm going to ask Melissa if she wouldn't mind stopping the recording, and then we will just stay on for just a couple minutes to see if anyone has any questions, but thank you so much.